Welcome everyone to the official ceremony to anoint the new Vermont State Cartoonist Laureate, brought to you by the Center for Cartoon Studies here in historic White River Junction, Vermont. My name is Luke Kruger Howard. I'm an alumni and faculty member at the Center for Cartoon Studies. I'm also the illegitimate son of one of the Mythbusters. Dad, if you're out there, can you just please answer one of my letters? Anyway, I don't want to get into that right now. Right now, I just want to thank all the CCS people out there for all their hard work putting this event together. And especially, I want to thank our sponsors for this event. That's 7 Days and the Vermont Arts Council. If it wasn't for you guys, we would just be having another day where we're sitting on our couch watching Tiger King and stress eating chocolate covered almonds. And so thank you guys so much for giving us a reason to get off our couch and go over to a different part of our couch to have this event. I also want to welcome all the CCS students out there. Hi, students. If you're listening to me right now, I just want you guys to know that we love you this much, which incidentally is 6 feet or more. That's how much we love you. So thanks for coming. And finally, to the folks out there who may just be accidentally watching this because they stumbled across this video while they were trolling YouTube for TikTok compilations or something like that. Thanks for stopping by. We hope you enjoy it. Folks, the year is 2020. Humans know only the indoors, and we wear only our sweatpants. It's a hard time. Long gone is the memory of the sweet smell of our coworkers' armpits. And the only taste that we can still have in our mouths is that taste of breaking news from CNN. But the time has come for us to name the new Vermont Cartoonist Laureate. And that is something that no virus or anything else can stand in the way of. It is, the show has to, as they say, the show has to continue being a show, as they say. So without any further ado, I want to get that ball rolling. But Luke, I hear you cry. What even is the Vermont Cartoonist Laureate? And I honestly don't know. I can't actually remember what it is, and it kind of sounds made up. It might be made up, but just in case it's not made up, I've invited a comic historian, the world-renowned comic historian, an amateur time traveler, with us today. Her name is Coco Fox. Please, everybody, welcome Coco Fox, who's going to give us a rundown on what the Cartoonist Laureate is all about. Coco.
Hello! Hello, CCS and fellow cartoonist lovers. Here I am going to share with you a brief history of the Vermont Cartoonist Laureate. I'm Coco Fox, and although I myself am not a Vermont Cartoonist Laureate yet, I'm here to share this history of Vermont's most prestigious cartooning honor. Its history is shrouded in mystery, and thanks to my countless hours in the secret archive of the Schultz Library, the story can now be told about how this laureate came to be. In the archive, I came upon a rare scrapbook made by a member of a secret society, and on New Year's Day, they held their annual secret meeting and ice cream social, and it was the only laureates were allowed into this exclusive club. There were Nobel Physics laureates. There were poetry laureates. There were even a few Nobel Peace Prize laureates. Oh yes, there were ghosts in attendance. And in the 2011 meeting and ice cream social, Marie Curie, club president, brought a very important issue to the group. Our secret laureate society is missing something. We have poets, doctors, chemists, physicists, and the literary elite, but it feels like we're missing something. Silence came over the laureates. And then a hand shot up. Can we get some cartoonists in here? Albert, that's a great idea. You're a genius. But then again, we all are. So let's bring a cartoonist into this crazy club Yeah! Obama, you're not a ghost and you're still president because it's 2011. Can you get a Cartoonist Laureate position going in the United States? Yes, Madam Curie, and I know just who to call. Operator, get me the Falcon. Ring, ring, ring. Hey, Michelle, I have another mission for you and CCS. Yes, Barack, what do you need? I need you to honor a talented cartoonist with a laureate. You're my only hope. Okay, I'll do it, but only because you're my best friend. From her executive office in White River Junction, Vermont, CCS President Michelle Ollie called together her dream team. James Sturm, CCS co-founder, can you get us our laureate? Dave Lloyd, operations manager, can you get the Vermont government on board with this idea? The CCS team went off to make this Vermont laureate thing happen. And they came back with their first cartoonist, James Kachalka, superstar. And with the help of Vermont Governor Pete Shumlin and Vermont Arts Council and the Vermont Statehouse, finally, on February 11, 2011, the state of Vermont appointed its first cartoon laureate. After 3 glorious ink-slinging years and many diary comics later, James Kachalka passed those laurels to Ed Koren. And Ed Koren became Vermont's second Cartoonist Laureate. Ed's 3-year reign was marked by lots of marks. So many marks, possibly too many marks. Nah, Ed could never have too many marks. And when the ink jar was empty, Ed was ready to pass his laurels on to another cartoonist. This time, it would be Alison Bechdel who would don the laurels as Vermont's 3rd Cartoonist Laureate. As a laureate, Alison showed the world that cartoonists could win every major cultural and arts award in pretty much every dimension possible. Despite all the social distancing, I'm pleased to report that the laurels have been passed in a safe and orderly fashion. And that brings us to today. Congratulations, Rick Veitch. You are now part of this proud tradition of Vermont Cartoonist Laureates. Now take your place alongside your brilliant peers in the international laureate community. Say hi to Madame Curie for me. And thank you so much for listening to this presentation. Back to you, Luke.
That was a very educational and historically accurate take on what the Vermont Cartoonist Laureate is. And thank you for coming here with us today. Folks, I wish that we had the ability to make this official. Normally what we would do is we would go up to Montpelier and go to the courthouse, and there'd be a bunch of powdered wig people, and they would bang some gavels and read the resolution, and then we would all carry Rick on our shoulders, and then they would...
Luke.
Oh, Michelle?
You're never going to believe it. I have the resolution.
You have the resolution?
I have the resolution. And I'm going to actually, since this is such an extraordinary circumstance, as the president of CCS, I'm going to exercise my executive powers granted by the Cartoon Studies Constitution, and will read the resolution and appoint the next Cartoonist Laureate. Whereas Vermont is enriched by the diverse creative talents of artists who live among its citizens as neighbors, colleagues, and friends. And whereas Vermont has been home to numerous nationally and internationally recognized cartoonists who enhance the quality of life in our state. And whereas the state of Vermont has recognized and promoted the artistic talents of our state's cartoonists by designating 4 Cartoonist Laureates. And whereas Rick Veitch began his publishing career in Vermont, cartooning for the University of Vermont's the Vermont Cynic, and continued his practice as part of the underground comics movement. Whereas Rick graduated as part of the pioneering class of the Joe Kubert School of Cartooning and Graphic Art in 1978, and then launched a career that would have him working on such iconic characters as Sergeant Rock, Swamp Thing, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. and in such publications as Heavy Metal and Epic Illustrated. Whereas he continued to hone his own unique vision, and he wrote and drew groundbreaking comics and graphic novels, including Heartburst, The One, Bratpack, Maximortal, Can't Get No, Army at Love, The Big Lie. Whereas Rick Veitch, prolific as he is legendary, continues to create superbly crafted fiction and nonfiction educational comics. And whereas, in celebration of cartooning's importance in the Vermont's artistic and cultural landscape, and in recognition of the arts form's communicative power, the Center for Cartoon Studies of White River Junction, with enthusiastic support of the Vermont Arts Council and Governor Phil Scott, has designated Rick Veitch, a native son of Bellows Falls, Vermont, longtime resident of West Townshend, Vermont, and highly acclaimed and visionary cartoonist, as Cartoonist Laureate. And whereas, for the three-year term, he will continue to wield his pen to reflect on the human condition as only a cartoonist can. And whereas, Rick Veitch has enjoyed his impressive career while living and being inspired by the Green Mountain State, and embodies the essence of the Vermont Cartoonist Laureate tradition. Now therefore be it. Resolved by the General Assembly, and who now congratulates Rick Veitch on his designation as the 4th Cartoonist Laureate. May your ink flow freely.
Yay! Hey, Michelle, thanks so much for doing that. And I just want to get into it. I want to bring Rick on here. Rick, are you there?
I'm here.
Hey, Rick. Congratulations for becoming the 4th Vermont Cartoonist Laureate. It's such a huge honor to have you be a part of our state. And your body of work is just so impressive, and it's just an honor to be a witness to that journey. And now to have this ceremony where we get to sort of put your name into the kind of state hall of fame, as it were, and kind of honor you in that way. I'm wondering how it feels for you to officially become a Vermont State Cartoonist Laureate.
Well, I'm really proud of my state that they would see fit to honor the coolest art form of all time. Growing up as a kid, I don't know if before you were a kid, comics were seen as things for morons, and everything's changed now. I think comics take their place, rightful place, with all the rest of the great arts that civilization has provided us with.
And is there something specific about being a cartoonist in Vermont that you feel like has been important to you?
Well, for me, it's nature. Getting to live in a place where there's trees and fields and plants and stuff really makes a big difference on my quality of life. I'm not someone who can survive in a city.
I think it's interesting because the state we live in, Vermont, it's a pretty low populated state as far as states go. But per capita, we seem to have an impressive amount of cartoonists. And just looking at the roster of past cartoonist laureates, it's just crazy that all of them happen to call Vermont home. There is one thing that I feel like is missing. I'm looking at the top of your head, and it's looking a little blank.
It's been that way for about 10 years now.
Yeah, I mean, there's that, but also I just feel like maybe there's something else that needs to get done, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Can you help me out here?
Well, we went to laureate.com and we ordered up a set of laurels. It was kind of a rush, so I don't know if they're going to fit right, but we have a set of laurels here to place upon my brow. Should we go ahead?
Yes, let's do it.
Dun, dun, dun.
And Rick, didn't I hear you had some sort of scepter?
Oh yeah, I got my scepter here.
Would you be willing to just sort of bless all of us cartoonists with your newfound laureate powers?
I would like to bless all of our imaginations with creativity, ideas, and spirituality and all those good things. Anno Domino.
You know, Rick, one of the things that we tried to do with this is get the past laureates to come along so that they can sort of help welcome in the new cartoonist laureate. I think some of those past laureates have joined us today, and I'm wondering if I could just invite them to come on and say a few things in support of Rick. What about Allison? I see you there.
I'm here.
Hey, Allison.
Hi. Hi, Luke. Hi, everyone. Hi, Rick.
Hi.
Can you guys hear me? Whew, I feel like a great weight has been lifted from my brow. This is amazing.
And I see Ed Corn. Ed, is that you?
That is me, ready with my ancient laurels that was presented to me 6 years ago and has not really stood the test of time, although they have matured as all pine laurels. This was presented to me by a wonderful student teacher at CCS 6 years ago as a fresh pine laurel wreath. And it is now, as you can see, a bit dry, but it's here. And I keep it as a constant reminder of the honor and the responsibility that we all have to mainly be ourselves. We have to take an oath of office, which Rick, you I think might have to take as well. I'm not sure. You may be spared this, but the oath is very simple. It is simply, I promise solemnly to honor my imagination and my skill and my art, and along with that, the state of Vermont. So I toast you with my scepter and my bottle of ink.
Thank you, Ed. You don't look quite as fuzzy as you do in your comics.
Well, that's because I've got the same pate you do. What's fuzzy is the laurels. That will do it.
Yeah, Ed, I want to recommend that you stay away from any open flames with those laurels because it could be a disaster.
I've got my fire truck outside. That'll take care of it all.
So Ed and Allison, do either of you have any sage bits of wisdom or anything else you'd like to say to Rick as he launches on his journey into the world of being a laureate?
I am only glad that it was an honorary post, given how little I did for it. And I hope that, Rick, you will do better than I did in that post.
Well, I share that same caveat with Allison. And I think I honored the post by simply working and continuing on the path that maybe led me to the Royal or Unroyal Society of Cartoonist Laureates. So I did a few talks here and there, but that's about it. And except for being honored and honoring the state and being of service that way and through the work I do.
Well, that sounds great. And that's exactly how I want to proceed with this great honor.
Well, thank you to the past laureates for being here today. It's a real honor to have you. And congratulations again to Rick. And I want to lead us into a bit of a conversation about your career and get to know you a little better now that you are officially the laureate. I don't feel like I'm as equipped as my colleague, Steve Bissett, who has known you for so many years. I want to invite him over to kind of interview you and let's just have you guys talk for a little bit about all things Rick. Steve, you there?
I am here. Rick, are you ready to chat a little bit about yourself?
Shoot.
What were your first impressions of the Cubert School, which is where you and I met in Dover, New Jersey back in September '76?
It was a complete buzz. I kind of spent my life struggling to make comics with a lot of negative reinforcement from the adults in my life up to that point, who just didn't understand what a cool art form comics were. Growing up in the 60s, they still had the whiff of Dr. Wortham, and they were kind of seen as a reading thing for idiots and morons. But I grew up during the 60s. I plugged into those Marvel comics when they started coming out, and so I was totally inspired. Meeting Joe Kubert, I was completely amazed at him as a person. First off, because he was so young looking. He had been in the golden age, so I was assuming he was in his 60s or 70s. Turned out he was in his 50s because he had started at the age of 12, I believe. And he looked like he was 35 because he was so young. And that first meeting with him where he went through my portfolio was just a life-changing experience. And then coming to the school and meeting you and Toddleben and Yates and Tim Truman and the whole gang, it was like I'd finally found my place in this world. Comics, writing and drawing became an organic part of who I am. If I hadn't gotten that grant and I hadn't been able to actually do it professionally, I think I always would have felt like I was a failure. It was that deep a central part of who and what I was. So that I'm a very fortunate and blessed person to have gotten where I got.
I'm going to weave into our conversation some of the questions that the Center for Cartoon Studies students had and a few other folks. So we'll keep going with the thread. One of the questions that was asked that I want to bring in now, Rick, if you're okay with it, is who were some of the non-cartoonists who inspired you to do comics and have inspired your work to this day? Writers, musicians, whatever.
Oh, jeekers. I grew up in the 60s, so all the great musicians, the Beatles and Dylan and the Beach Boys and, Zappa, Beefheart, all that stuff. I didn't go to college until I went to Kubert school. So I kind of missed out on a lot of the literary education, and I was always catching up with my reading and stuff. But, I went through all the adventure authors and stuff, and then I kind of went on to the literary guys, like Henry Miller. I found that I was always looking for an interesting voice in a writer, someone who could had like a rhythm and a richness to it. And I realize now that there was a connection between those kinds of writers and the writers of comics, because the best comic book writers use those kind of tricks.
Rick, I'm also going to ask, what is it that inspires you to create comics? What is it inside you that drives that?
I don't know. I just know it's there. I wake up in the morning, I'm 68 years old, and I wake up in the morning and I think, oh boy, I get to draw comics today. Still, I don't know what it is, Steve, but it's a lovely thing. Now, a big part of my focus is doing educational comics and informational comics, which I consider a great challenge to use our art form to describe information and stories of other people that have nothing to do with me at all.
A big part of your comics career, especially since the mid-90s when you got to launch your own self-publishing line with Roaring Rick's Rarebit Fiends, has been you sharing with a readership your dreams, your studying of your dreams. And I'm also wondering if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about how your dreams have affected your creative process, including earlier in your career, before you were actually doing the dream comic.
Well, I've been doing dream work seriously since I was about 20 years old. And it began when I sort of overdid it as a young man and kind of fell into a state of depression. I could hardly get out of bed. And I started having these powerful nightmares, in dreams, which were so strong that I started writing them down. I began to study what dreaming was and how one could use one's dreams to center oneself. Dreaming is psychologically, it's sort of like the keel of a boat. It helps keep us straight and steady. And I learned really quickly that, paying attention to dreams and sort of incorporating them into my daily life healed me. It made me a better person. And I always wanted to bring that into comics. It took me like another 20, 25 years before I, really pushed it and started doing Rarebit Fiends. But I think out of all the things I've done, to me, it's the most important and most fulfilling.
Not to get too Jungian here, you're the friend that turned me on to Carl Jung. How does that process differ for you between drawing images from your dreams versus drawing images from your waking imagination?
Well, because dreams are kind of like a message from the deep self, at least to me, that kind of come to heal us and help us figure out how to go forward in life. And so to understand them, you use your intuition. And now when I sit down and draw, art is total intuition. And so you mix those two together, a dream and art, and it'll take you places that you've never thought of before. I highly recommend it to everybody to create art from your dreams, and you will understand them better, you'll integrate them better into your lives, and you'll be a better person.
One of our students asked if you had any advice on how to work with other artists and writers.
How to work with other art. Boy, I think every situation is different. It's almost like making music. And you and I have sat in a room and made comics together. And, it's just like a great feeling of when it's really going right. It's like a couple of people making music, everything kind of rises up as this creative force, vision ends up on the page. That's what I'm always looking for. You can't always get that with everybody, but it seems like there are so many different ways into doing comics that you always learn something, no matter who you're working from.
I also wanted to ask what your workday looks like now versus what your workday was like, say, 20, 25 years ago. Is there anything you do now that saves a lot of time, relieves stress, or have you just eased into sort of a sweet spot in terms of your working life?
Well, in the early days, it was, workaholic time. If you're working on a monthly book, you're putting in 8 to 10 hours a day, easy, if you're doing it right. If you're not, then you're, working all night and stuff to make these deadlines, which is tough. But, when you're a young man, you do it. I've got my own rituals of how I approach the day and the number of hours I spend at the board now than I used to. I have to say also that I've assimilated working digitally. I've got a Cintiq now, and that saves a lot of time, especially for a reference artist like myself. I always had thousands of books around, so I knew how to draw stuff. Now it's right there on the computer to help you. And the software that is available is just extraordinary now. So I'm really loving the digital age.
Rick, I wish I could pop a cork of some champagne, but we don't have anything like that.
It just so happens we popped the cork a few minutes ago, so you're not going to hear the pop, but we
all
have
right.
the champagne.
Well, here, I got a LaCroix, so I'm going to pop the LaCroix. Yeah, and then here's to you, Rick.
Here's to
I'm going to cheers.
And here's to all who ply the inky trade.